Gents, Matt, would we rescheduled this 15, 20 times?
7.5, I think.
That was a hassle.
Well,
I couldn't be.
We shifted it by 15 minutes while we played around with your camera and mic settings there, Javier.
Oh, my
So I got
gosh.
counted for half. He's not getting paid by
Yeah,
that,
it was
right?
half. Yeah, it was half.
It ratcheted a little, so.
We have been waiting and so pumped, Matt, to have you on. You are absolutely one of the leading voices in cybersecurity in the MSP channel and doing
I'm
the
just
work
the
of
loudest, John.
a
It
saint.
seems
I know,
to be.
but you know, I've heard a lot of loud ones, and to be candid, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. You actually know what you're talking
Yeah,
about
man.
and hands-on as
He's a
well,
double threat.
which is
That means a lot to me.
super refreshing for me with all the kind of security theater we see out there. So,
Well, and not to turn this
Yeah.
into a bromance, but the
Yeah.
the same goes back to you and your team, right? So, it's so many times I see people in the, security space and putting out histrionics and, things. And then you got the people that, speak softly and carry a big stick. And, it's always nice to find the latter sometimes. So
yeah,
mutual.
much apprecited. We've if we have one knock on us, we're not loud enough,
Yeah,
but
that's what I was trying to say nicely, but thanks for,
Yeah.
codifying that for me.
We do. I mean, I think it's a little, our previous lives and background, and so I think it's a little. We're naturally we're naturally quiet on that front, but
Well, the good news is though the crossover is in education, and I think that point where you don't have to be loud, you're just giving, people are just learning, and that's what I think this is. And so I like this kind of loud, if that makes sense. So I love it.
It's the good. It's the good loud.
It's the
good loud.
The good loud.
Yeah, we want to keep it real. Like I would tell everyone, details are pretty darn important in cybersecurity because that's what the bad guys are taking advantage of on the margins, to get in and wreak havoc. So, Matt, you have a storied career, lots of experience. I never asked you, how the heck did you get in to cybersecurity? One, and two, how did you turn into the cybersecurity unicorn that likes being on camera and traveling nonstop?
Yeah. Maybe the other one was a little bit of a proclivity ahead of time, but I used to have eyes that pointed in one direction, and I got punched in the face in cyber, and now they kind of do this, right? So, no, I was an MSP. I started out, about 11 years ago, 12, maybe 13. I'm getting older, but years ago, as just a technician. I used to change careers every 3 or 4 years. I was in banking. I had my Series 766 LHVA in finance, and I just got bored, and then I finally found technology. So fast forward through the growth of an MSP from 7 employees as a very minor owner to 140 employees when I left, and now 400 in the current entity. And so I was in a part of Wichita, Kansas at that time where a lot of weapons manufacturing, a lot of parts manufacturing for CUI and CUI kind of space existed. So I started down the path of learning the concepts of cybersecurity unbeknownst to myself through the lens of 800-171. And then as we grew, we had a ransomware event from our evil that was part of an acquisition of an MSP that we acquired, over the years. And that loss, ended up taking 18 months of my time. It was, this lawsuit or settling this document or having this conversation with SpearTip or Coveware or, Lewis Brisbane, whoever it may be, right, as you're living through that world. And so kind of it hit me first through that major event. It actually gave me a launch pad inside my organization. I had written, an email about my single greatest fear as an MSP was we would be the next Eric at ProTech, that we'd be the next major Kaseya event. This was back in 2018 or 2019. And I basically kind of set that stage, and then the event happened. And so it was almost this like kismet solution that created a path for us to win, have a separate security team inside of the MSP I was with, to have the ability to start tracking incidents, which was kind of unheard of, certainly from smaller MSPs at those times. And we did 70 incidents that we came across. And I just kind of looked at it one day and realized, like, our world will never be the same. That first time I picked up a phone and played Angry Birds, and my virgin experience of technology would not be the same experience for my grandkids, would not be the same experience for my kids for long if we kept losing the way we're losing today. And so it kind of forced me into that. And then I realized the real challenge is it's not a technology problem. Our problem is a business problem. Our problem is the same thing that's played out in history for the entire time of our world. The Industrial Revolution, both in the UK and the US, are no different. You have new technology. It gets built with a capitalistic endeavor to grow and make money. And eventually you start having roofs fall in and things. And now you have building codes, right? Like this is kind of where we are today. And so my mission and my vision was to educate. Right. If I can make analogies that help an executive understand, if I can drive forward in our judiciary space, if I can drive forward in our regulatory space, if I can drive forward in just the education of the practitioners that I can. So it's a calling. Believe it or not, I'm actually an introvert. I don't prefer to be with other humans. I prefer to be alone. But, I do what I do to accomplish a mission that I'm on. So that's how I kind of fell into this, if that makes sense, was unsolvable problem, just enough ego to go chase trying to solve it, and stupid enough to keep doing it every day.
If you were switching careers, you must be an innately, naturally curious human.
100%. I like to build these frameworks in my head of how I see things, and then test them, blow them up, make them not work.
So X, I know I'm totally going off what we're going to talk about today, but I personally think curiosity and really the desire to understand how something works and why is a trait of some of the absolute best cybersecurity practitioners and IT practitioners out there, in my opinion.
And threat actors.
Yeah,
threat actors.
Right? Honestly, right?
I mean, to be honest, we were talking, I don't know who these guys are, and clearly we're on the other side of the fence from them, but, we've been seeing these Black Cat ransomware guys, and I think me, X, and Dave were like, guys are pretty damn creative. Kind of impressed, actually. Kind of impressed. But, natural curiosity, willingness to understand. So, X, maybe, something that could be useful. There's a lot of folks in the MSP world that are, want to get into security or want to enhance kind of their own internal security operations. Granted, most don't run a 24/7 shop, so, they need extra help. But I remember one of the things you always talked about in hiring for the Threat Ops Center. So for those that don't know, Javier was recently promoted to be our Chief Technology Officer, but for years prior, he was our Vice President of Threat Operations. So talk to me about the curiosity aspect and maybe some examples where you've seen it work really well. Maybe some recent breaches. I mean, I know we've had a crap ton lately.
We've had a lot of good noise lately going on. But curiosity is definitely the key to taking yourself to the next level. You can get by on the bare minimums, like, just do this, follow the SOPs and stuff like that. But if you want to go from like here up to here in the security world, you gotta have that curiosity factor with it. Because when we talk about what takes, a SOC analyst for being a regular one to like a superstar, it's like threat hunting. It's, well, what's this do? Well, what's this command? And then you start unraveling it, and figuring out where this stuff's going. Then you start learning, and you're like, well, maybe I saw this here. Let me go check somewhere else, And then it's that curiosity of like, well, why did this happen in this network? You know what I mean? And I will not stop until I get to the bottom of it. And that's kind of how my mind works. Like, I will dig all the way through the earth if I'm curious enough, because I'm just like, there's got to be a way this works. There's got to find something here.
I think there's a corollary to sports, right? Like if you ever met somebody who was just obsessed with a sport and was at a high level operation of it, let's say baseball, whatever it may be. My buddy Billy was that guy. He genuinely wanted to understand how the ball rotated.
Right, spin rate.
He genuinely wanted to understand how the shoulder drop changes the architecture of the bat, right? Like
different release
those
angles.
Those are curiosity points. Yeah, those are curiosities. And I think you find high level people, David, you're a threat researcher, and it has to come into this. Like I saw you spark up when you were like, now we're tracking the human elements of this. And it's like, that's a curiosity and a passion combined. And I think if you meet those two, John, where you have curiosity and passion, boy, you have dynamos, right? Yeah. Like that's the point. So.
Yeah, and then during the interview process, the things that I'm looking for is them asking questions back. Like I might just say something random, like, what do you think about PS exec? And they're like, oh, I don't know what that is. And it's like, well, do you want to know what it is? And then, start unraveling it a little bit, being like, well, it laterally spreads. And like this and this. And, you can kind of see that the light bulbs are going on a little bit. And you're like, okay, they're of the curious mindset. They got a little something in there, even if they don't maybe know. Maybe, that's one thing that's interesting about interviewing people, to kind of, you can hire someone that's like the Wikipedia security, like just come up all the acronyms on the spot, but they might not be the correct person. You want that you want someone that could be like, oh, well, let me figure out how that works. They just may not know everything right on the spot. And so I know a lot of people when they interview,
there's memorization, right? You have memorization, and then you have this can they make it make sense? Just because you know what DHCP is, do you understand that there's a broadcast component that means anything that here it can be part of it? There's a response component. There's how it's destruct. Yeah, you get into this what's the ACK mean? What do you and what I mean is when you start thinking about that way, it's not just memorizing something, you're putting the components in the little picture of how it's supposed to work, right? That's the kind of framework I'm talking about. And
exactly
that's exactly what you're describing.
Yeah,
memorizes it great.
And I see when people sometimes people, they'll Google security guy interview questions and they'll just ask them that. And if they get them wrong, then they're like, well, you're not qualified. It's they might be. You got to get a little bit deeper sometimes. Because even myself, I'll forget random acronyms all the time. I've been in this industry for so long, but still, someone will just randomly say something like, Acme server for certificates. What the world is that? Sounds like Looney Tunes.
Yeah. Don't do it, Coyote. Don't do it.
I'm god awful with acronyms. I'm absolutely terrible with acronyms. But I mean, to your point, right? The best reverse engineers I've ever met have always said it's enough is not enough. It's not enough to say, well, it's bad. It's why is it bad? What's it doing? Why is it different from every other bad thing out there? I think that sparks a passion. The types of people that you're explaining are the ones that will start solving a problem, forced to go to sleep. They'll lie in bed and they won't go to sleep because they'll be like, if I just go back downstairs for 5 minutes, I'm pretty sure I can work out this next bit.
Oh, man. Story of my life.
And then the next day, it's bags under their eyes. They're like, I haven't slept.
And then I'll spend 4 hours, stay up till 3 a.m., not figure it out, and come up 15 minutes in the morning and figure it out. That's
how it is. I tell you when I noticed something driving, and I think this is just more of a how to perform better in lots of disciplines. You guys know I do that race simulator all the time to practice driving a real race car. And I notice, in the same as playing Guitar X, I can practice this song over and over again. And then an hour in, I think I'm getting crappier at it. I put it down and I come back 2 days later and it was like my brain was able to continue the learning process while you weren't there. And I think, some of the best practitioners, and this applies to, I've learned it, in some ways the hard way on the business side, a drive to master fundamentals and understand fundamentals, and then an enduring curiosity. Yeah. I think when those two things come together, this is when you see people, go at a really high level. I mean, our CFO right now is just an absolute rock star at data analytics, and he can't stop because it's so interesting to him. It's 7 days a week.
I can imagine.
And we learn so much.
And Excel bores me to snot.
Yeah, it does. He's made Excel great again.
He's made Excel fun, great. Right? Yeah,
there you go.
I used to make fun of Excel. Now I'm just like, oh, it is useful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Matt, what's your favorite part of working in cybersecurity, specifically in the MSP community, and what's your least favorite part?
Yeah, I think it's almost a double-edged sword, right? In the same favorite and least favorite. I think my favorite is that, in my opinion, the MSP community, the consuming SMB entity, are 15 or so years behind even our crappy corporate brethren that are not doing cybersecurity well either. And so you have this situation where this magic moment in time seems to exist where the desire to learn, the external regulatory pressures, the external growth in maturity pressures are all forcing MSPs to understand that security is endemic to what they do and must be something they deal with, right? So in that world, I have this massively moldable clay that, you like to tell people I'm the guy that lives in that 3-year space. I like to be in that 3-year thought leadership space, right, is what I try to do, which just means nobody knows I'm an idiot for 2 years, right? So you have this positive built
way to do that.
No, but no, I'm finally at the 3 or 4 years of out here, proselytizing and educating and driving, and I'm actually seeing results, right? I'm actually seeing people, and I don't mean to my own, growth and aggrandization. I just mean in general, you're starting to see the community ask the questions, be able to suss out the more and more of the fake crap and marketing things. So I love the fact that the MSPs are engaged and trying to solve this today.
Right.
I think the challenge is I also don't love the fact that there is nothing to make what an MSP is be something that's requisite. So you start in a situation where being non-regulated and not having anything to really put pressure on means that you can have a new startup every day that says, I'm going to do this. and there's no barriers to entry in our world. So it's kind of a double-edged sword that you're getting more and more people here wanting to solve it, but in the same breath, you have so many people out there that have no idea what they're doing, no operational maturity, no ability to grow through this, and yet they're going to come in as the experts. And so, I think that's the duality of it is that the MSP is maturing, but the MSP is also not being forced by anything to drive that maturity to some standard, some baseline that we can all operate from. But yeah, sorry.
That's a really, really good point. I think I agree with you. Like, one of the things I love is folks that it was kind of, I used to teach tennis, right? It was like my summer job.
Getting surgery for tennis elbow coming up here
there
soon.
You go.
Yeah.
That sucks, by the way.
Close together there on that one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I love teaching the kids that just wanted to go hard and learn about it because they loved it. The ones that were difficult are the ones that, frankly, weren't equipped to handle any form of criticism, or they didn't want to be there. And
you see that in Reddit every day. I mean, right? Those are those kids.
Yes.
I don't mean to be that guy, but
right.
So, sorry.
And I would say I think that's the area where I absolutely love. And the best thing is you and some of the other folks have been pushing the ball with loud voices in MSP security, along with the fact that you hear these horror stories from MSPs that have been mass ransomed. The insurers are terrified of them for good reason. But that's all solvable from a security standpoint, are largely solvable. The ones that are tough is like the intellectual arrogance. There's not a lot of people have ever been the bad guy for a living professionally that aren't a criminal. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes we get folks, I tested this tool and I have this product, and like, but have any of you ever actually broken into a network before? You skip like step 1 through 6. And I think that's the area where a willingness to learn would be really, really helpful, because it goes back to that whole mastering fundamentals. This is one reason I love IT guys trained into cybersecurity. I actually think they make better security.
They already understand
analysts.
how the bolts go together, where the water flows. Like, I mean, I don't think that's part of the IP protocol, but they did do IP over AV carrier. So, right, there was a actual
nice.
There's actually a RFC for it. It was a joke.
Is there really not a joke RFC?
Yeah. There's been like 2 or 3 more RFCs since then. It's like, but anyways,
like,
sorry.
How do you force the birds to act?
That's what I was saying, man.
No, they actually did. No, they actually did this live one time after. Yeah, but
did they send this in?
You actually brought up a good. No, they cannot. They hit each other. It's collision. John, you actually mentioned something, right, that kind of triggered me on this. So when I was watching these ransomware events happen, I was dealing with all of that. I was dealing with the BECs. I was dealing with the incidents and the email compromises and things. I started realizing something's broken here. I don't understand what's happening enough to put the right controls in place. And, sometimes you're not able to, but sometimes you just don't understand it. I mean, that is that humility factor you kind of spoke towards. So I started doing Try Hack Me. Right. So I now am, I don't know if most people know this. It's not anything you claim most places, but I think I'm at number 5,637 out of the 1.2 million or so accounts. And I spend almost every day doing some type of threat emulation to try to understand more. And, I'm not great at it, but, I wanted to understand it and then wanted to know what they're doing. And once I did, it was so catalyzing for me because I saw how stupid simple this is and how even the basic controls aren't really even enough. You have to start understanding, and I came up with this term back 3 years ago, of live compromised. You have to start understanding that there's a reason that you have identify, protect, comma, space, detect, respond, recover. You wouldn't have those other 3 if you didn't intend to have to use them, right? And so everybody talks about my stuff protects you from everything. Not true. Just because you don't have a good enough microscope, right? Even down to the baseball player we talked about earlier. Once that kid's good enough, he goes, that man's not great at baseball. Why? Because I've seen him throw a baseball and he doesn't understand the mechanics of it. And but to a kid watching a baseball being thrown that was not educated to that point, it'd be, oh, that was cool. You hit the guy in the glove up there, and the guy swung his bat. It's just that difference of once you start understanding, it gets easier and easier to kind of see how much more there is to the picture. And so I say all that to say, we focus so much on the protect, we don't focus on all those other components. And that, that's what's so broken, I think, back to intellectual arrogance, is that we don't have the right conversations with our clients to set the expectations even appropriately.
Yeah.
My job's not to stop all the threats. My job is both to be the person that educates you how to drive the car, make sure the airbags are working, has the ambulance crew structure to be able to respond, make sure there's hospital beds and response capability and surgeons on the right rotation, and all the things that come into how you both protect ahead of time and respond to that accident you didn't expect to happen or that threat actor that did get through. And how do you do the triage, the stop, the containment, and the recovery and get you in the hospital bed and back out where you're driving cars again, right? And so, if you take that into cybersecurity, we never ever talk about these other pieces. We don't talk about all that other stuff and to the client. And so the challenge is you've got to now take an MSP and help them go have those conversations with clients to say, here's all the stuff we need. And here's the pieces why we need it. Yes, I need you to invest in the ambulance fund. That's why the city makes it a tax you have to pay. Yes, you need it, right? Like these are the things that we think about from an operational perspective in regular life. Yet when businesses come to it from a cyber perspective, it's no. We just put them in that fancy car nobody ever gets hurt in.
Right.
Well, that's not how this works.
That's not how the game works. We've been, we started this whole Blackpoint Command series, which is really kind of a every 2 weeks webinar series to teach MSPs how to build a stack. And It's going to be a good segue into this, how to build a stack, how to price it, and how to sell the damn thing and speak in a common language. And one of the things we've been playing with is, you mentioned, I think, these kind of 5 pillars. It was kind of asset identification, or identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. We've switched up, same meaning, but we switched up the words a little bit to be like asset identification. Got to know what you need to protect and what you have. Right.
I saw your presentation. This is a good one.
Right. And then instead of protect, because I'm never sure what that meant. There's a lot of forms of protection. So I changed it to harden, which meant reduce your attack surface. And I think that's a really, really important area. And so, and that is mostly education.
Yeah, bulletproof vest does not protect you. Yeah. It hardens you against well-placed body shots.
There you go.
Like that's the difference in those two.
Not so much.
Not so much. So
and then for detect, we just made it a little bit more nuanced because, exploits and malware dominate the news cycle in cybersecurity. But kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier, which is mastering the fundamentals. The tradecraft, or someone call it behavior, that you use to figure out where you are in the network. So, I think that's a big challenge, especially as you go hit larger networks. Great offensive guys have like networking and domain fundamentals like nailed, because you don't just see like the 10 other subnets that are there. Like you actually have to try. Right. And so, for us on the detect side, it has to be both on the malicious tool set or the malware, but then a huge component on the tradecrafter behavior. Because to be candid, when we caught the Hafnium guys a while ago, there wasn't an EDR on the market catching what we were seeing. Not one. And it's not a knock on those guys. No. But what do you think these guys do every day for a living? They wake up to figure out how to evade this stuff. 100%. And so what tips their hand, which tips a lot of, previously unseen malware's hand, is the tradecraft. Because if you master the fundamentals, you understand like this stuff has to happen unless you have a magic exploit for everything that no one can pick up on. And so, and then on the response side, what was that term? You had this should have been a shirt. It's like, I don't know what you said, live like you're breached, or
live compromised. Yeah.
Live compromised.
Yeah.
That's on the response side.
And also on the hardening, right? Because it's also about saying, why would I give principles of least privilege above this level to a technician? Like I was always chasing this like golden emblem of saying, I want my Dallas technician. I use this 1,000 times with vendors. I want my Dallas technician, when he's compromised, to only have access to the 9 companies on Team Charlie that he or she should have had access to. That's it.
Right.
So that I can have 5 people suing me at once, not 696 of them.
That's
right.
It.
And that was the reality of what I took to my boardroom. That was the reality of the way I tried to approach it when I was at the former MSP, was just trying to do risk reductions and damage control reduction, and also the speed you speak towards.
Yeah.
But in the preparation phase, it's about saying, I know John might not be a good John forever. Right. John could be bad John next week. How do I deal with that? How do I, to your point, find it and find the behavior? And then also, it's not lost on me that HD Moore now started a company that does network enumeration as a predominant basis after he got done with Metasploit, right? Like, so, it's not lost on me that that's his new company based on your comments of the fundamentals and hunting through networks, and you land.
It's a major reason why we do live network mapping in our tool.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, if you're an offensive guy, you're going to kill for that, right? And if you're a defensive guy, you want the context. That way you can operate with a little bit of information asymmetry advantage. Hey, this user, because when you're looking at thousands of networks and you have to protect and keep a damn near perfect record, you have to get context quickly. Yep. And knowing that, this person's VPN'd in, we can tell it's a home network here, versus corporate domain is really important. So, it's kind of a good lead into, what we really wanted to talk about today is really talk about building and maybe even selling a defensible, pragmatic, and effective stack. I love kind of aligning it to those 5 pillars you mentioned, the identify, protect, or harden,
100%,
detect. We're all going to have a different opinion, I'm sure. But if you ran you're running security for a massive MSP with all of your experience now, and same question for X and Dave, if you had to pick classes, not names of products, classes of tools that would be like, this is my stack that I think I can afford, and I think I can, not eat the costs. What's above the line? What's below the line? I know it's a loaded one, but this is what MSPs want.
Well, and here's the challenge. I think mine's going to be a little bit of an off answer, as I'm one to do. Right. I think the challenge is actually your stack and your job is not to protect your client's network as an MSP.
Right.
Your job is to be defensible in how you chose to protect your client's network as an MSP. And what I mean by that is we follow very closely to the same way doctors have done business in the last couple of 100 years. Mm-hmm. In the very beginning, they knew how to saw off your leg and apply leeches. Those were 2 of the main treatments that were well within their scope of understanding. But as that grew, doctors stayed as this kind of smartest guy or gal in the room for a very long time until ultimately doctors killed patients when they didn't practice common practices. You had lawsuits, you had things, and you drive the creation and expansion of AMA. And now you have medical practices and common understanding of when you failed or when you didn't in the US, and everywhere took the similar suit. So in the same breath, I would say it's your job to stop being the smartest guy or gal in the room. Find a framework, right? Find something that you can be defensible in, and then apply across that framework. And what I mean by that is, let's say you took the top CIS top 18, right? And you're now having to have conversations with your client, back to your point of what can I sell and actually not eat and not lose money on. And you would just take the top controls that you can deal with and put them in your stack. So in that case, 10, 10.1, 10.2, 10.3 talk about an EDR, right? 7 talks about vulnerability management, having a SOC and SIEM come in play and some of the later controls. And the point being is that you would just start aligning to that and go have a conversation with your client and say, Mr. Client, I'm not the smartest guy and gal in the room anymore. We have well-known standards of how to set up an information system to secure our house and be protected. Here's the 4 things I do for you. I already identify your assets. I already identify your software. I have those tools built in. I pay for SentinelOne or for Blackpoint Cyber as the base unit from the protection perspective I have. And you lay them out. And then you talk about the projects and things that need to exist, the policies and things that need to exist and change, the way they handle their data and change as a ongoing basis, and where needed products show up, right? And as you build that, that's how it goes. Now, since you forced me to answer this, I wouldn't go anywhere without an EDR. I would definitely, as an MSP, be consuming a SOC as a service and a full-blown service for me, period, right? To protect myself.
Right.
And secondarily, I would start making sure that clients understand that they are missing these parts of respond, recover, right? Because when you get into the CIS, they align. Right. They have an R for respond, they have recover, they have detect, they have protect. And so when you talk with your client, maybe you don't get down in the weeds, but you talk about major categories and what they do, right? And when you say, oh, you don't want to pay to have Blackpoint Cyber and have a SOC and the SIM and those other aspects of this, just understand when it comes time to respond and recover, I can't. Have a nice day. I can't find these things, and just understand that's your choice. And what you're doing is you're building defensibility. And I'll take this all the way back to the beginning, and then I'll shut up. What you're doing is you're building the ability when you are sitting in front of the reasonable person rule, which is most of what our constituent law exists in the United States and pretty much everywhere else is, would a reasonable person feel you did what was necessary to try to meet your contract and protect the client based on the information provided? Well, if you're following a framework and you can show where you've improved because you started with web root and then you moved up to this and then you removed all that and then we added these controls and you document that, you're showing the health of a maturity model. You're starting to see the way that cybersecurity should grow for you to be able to meet that defensibility in front of 12 of your peers in a jury in the United States, right? Especially. So I think we're starting to see that part of that is what I would use as to drive my selection, not the tools themselves nor the components. Those have to come into play, but it should be starting with the defensibility of you saying, if I'm going to protect you, you need to be a willing participant.
Right.
And here's the things I'm going to be able to do natively. And here's the things I need your help on. And you start getting into stuff that's not even money. Like how many people still give local admin rights to their clients? Like 90%, 70, 80, 90%.
Or they give some service, the same local admin on every computer. Which
David,
what
could you do with local admin rights on a machine, right? I can't imagine that there's any EDR that stops what I could do if I land there enough to expand, right? And I have crappy skills. So
I'm keeping the Cheshire Cat grin in here. You know, the second you say, oh, you've got domain creds on admin creds on a domain controller, you're like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah. You're
gonna now it's a party.
Right, yeah.
Matt, one of the best answers I've heard, because and this kind of aligns with I think our view too, which is you got to kind of start with that common lens that any human can understand. So I love those 5 pillars, that identify, protect or harden, but then you got to go another level deeper. And in my opinion, there is this, and I know they don't want to call it a framework. I just don't have a better term for it. There's nothing better than CIS out there, in my opinion.
Yeah. Phyllis is amazing. I know she was on last week, but Phyllis is fantastic.
She's amazing.
It's
Frameworks are amazing.
Yeah, and if you're an MSP, guess what? Now you're changing the entire conversation with you're having, because I think when it's so tool focused, does the construction company you sold a UTM next gen firewall, maybe DNS protection to last year, understand the difference between that and the EDR? They're just thinking, nerds, please, like, what's my bill? How much am I paying? And I would like this,
and make sure
you guys are helping me run my construction business. I can't keep up with all this stuff. But if I walk to and say, listen, when I look at your network, these are best practices, right? So this is like kind of following the doctor's advice on living healthy, so you don't end up with some terrible condition down the road. Step one, we have to understand what you have. We already got that covered. Our RMM, maybe we have vulnerability management.
Exactly.
We're seeing it, right?
Yeah. And you get to brag about yourself a little bit, right? And Give
yourself a
Step
win.
2, we have taken the CIS kind of framework and their benchmarks and controls, and we've systematically gone through and hardened your network. Step 3, you need some way to catch the bad guy, like on the detection side, like if there's actually someone there. We've put in EDR technology, maybe we've gotten, MDR or SOC or something like that. And then lastly, I would say it really simply, you're connected to a horrible neighborhood called the internet that you choose to run all of your business's commerce over. If we had a forward operating base in Afghanistan, would you not have armed guards sitting out there all night? Would you feel comfortable in there? That's 100%. The respond side. And then lastly, it hits the fan and we got to live to fight another day. What is our kind of bug out plan to save our ass when we are under like full attack and it's having some success, if the defenders get overrun or failed, or, in this game, it's really, there's a third party supply chain hit and it can go so fast it can crush you.
Very much.
You
got to kind of pitch it.
That's the conversation.
Yeah, you got to pitch it kind of like a package and a plan, right? Like, here's my security package and here's the plan that it does, or here's the actionable stuff it will do for you.
You know what, though? I mean, the MSPs that don't do this. So obviously, we're going on about the CIS. What they propose is amazing, and really, we're trying to encourage MSPs to adopt that and follow it. Or even if they don't follow the CIS exactly, and you find some other system that tells you to do these things, that's fine. This is probably going to offend some MSPs, and I apologize for this, but the ones that are going to be successful in the future are the ones that are going to follow these frameworks. And the reason for that is because your customers are getting more educated in cybersecurity. They care more about what happens to their business because they understand the financial impact and cost of an attack, and they're going to ask you those awkward questions themselves. And if you don't have the answer, they're going to go to another MSP that does have the answer, that does prepare in advance.
And even if they don't know the questions to ask, listen, cyber insurance companies know they need it. they're going to force that question, and then it's just shit's going to roll downhill and it'll end on the MSP's desk.
It's twofold, because the other MSPs that do get it, to David's point, are going, and I've even said this to them, go and talk with a client that's a prospect and say, here's the things I cover. Controls 1 and 2 are about identifying yourself. Right. Control 10 starts off with malware. These are the 18 things you need to be doing. And of course, John, one of those is SOC, right? In the IG2, IG3 side. Now, if you go as an MSP and you say, okay, listen, go ask the other guys and gals you're talking to if they understand how to do all this protection. Mm-hmm. And when you start asking that, you're giving them the questions to go ask, right, in your proposal. You're saying, here's the things and how I'm going to attack them. And even to your point, John, the recover after you've responded, that's also in there. Backup and the understanding of how it's structured. That's all part of CIS 18. And it gives a guide, right? It gives a journey. So when you give that to a client in a way that you can make it pretty, because I'm not a pretty marketing guy, I'm an engineer, right? But when you give it to them a way that they can see this journey they're going to go through to get to where they're secure, they understand it's not just an overnight thing. They understand the value in it more too. And so I think you have a lot of reasons that following a framework, it makes it a referential object, right? You're not a smart guy. You're just going, hey, listen, I'm just going to follow this plan just like a CPA would for this. They follow the 1040, whatever. But
what do you guys think on? So there's frameworks on obviously an MSP. I think they got to start with their own operation because it's actually. I always said it's hard enough to run one damn network well, let alone 50 or 100 customers. You know what I mean? You got users involved. What about the questions MSPs should be asking their vendors? Because I also think we as security vendors and just software vendors in general, especially as we move more to a cloud, right? I think we all believe. Well, I don't want to speak for you guys. I believe that companies that run mostly on-prem infrastructures tend to get hit more often than the others, just because there's some hygiene issues. However, I'll also give you. If you go all in on the cloud, well, statistically, it's better. When it goes bad, it's really bad. It's like a house of cards. And that's if the actual vendor and their cloud infrastructure gets hacked and used to deploy ransomware or something like that. Imagine the Kaseya event if it was on the cloud version. Oh my gosh. It would be, I don't even want to think about it. That's a disaster. So where do you think our industry has to go? I know we're trying to push, kind of secure coding, some sort of standard, application pen testing. Go for it, David next. I know you guys have a lot of thoughts on this one. I think there's a lot of room for improvement because, one of the things when you do MDR, you see how other people's tools are maybe operating or not operating, and it does open our eyes quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I think that the first and foremost question in any situation, if I'm an MSP and I'm going into an environment and I'm speaking to a potential customer, my question to them is going to be, how much of your infrastructure is on site? How much of it's in the cloud? How much of it are you which systems have you got in DMZ? What's your current security practices? Do you have an IR response plan? Do you have a company that's lined up to engage with an IR when something goes wrong? Not if, when, because it will. Do you have a security AV solution on there at the moment? Even if you turn around and tell me it's Clam AV, even if you tell me it's one of the open source ones, at least you've got something. Have you had any attacks historically that have been alerted to? What's your security practices in terms of your current software allowance? So, your policy, do you allow video games on your corporate laptops? Do you allow third-party software on your laptops? Those are avenues for potential attacks. They're avenues to farm data. Anyone that's done any kind of security work historically always gets asked the questions, what video games do you play? Well, if you play online video games, that's an avenue to use you as a means of acquiring data. Quite frankly, it's unfortunate for customers, but it's going to feel like an interrogation. And it's not to make you feel ashamed of what you're currently running, but to provide you the best possible protection. Because quite frankly, when it goes wrong, it will go really wrong. And the whole purpose of all of this is just mitigation. There is no, as Matt said, there is no one solution to solving all of these problems. You want one solution, unplug your computer.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Don't use one. But you're an MSP. Where I'm kind of getting at is what are the questions the MSP is asking of folks like us, your backup provider on.
So not a customer, but your providers for security solutions.
this cuts both ways. You have to make smart choices on the vendors you choose to do business with.
Oh, yeah.
And there's price pressures, right? I mean, I'm seeing this with a product 100%. Right now that scares the crap out of me out there, but the price is great and it's flying off the shelves because it's solving a problem. But I kind of feel like it could be really dangerous.
What's your response times? That's like first and foremost, like how fast does it take you from getting an event to responding to an event? What do your standard remediation actions look like? How many attacks have you prevented in, say, the last 30 days? Those are 3 probably critical questions that you will get asked. Furthermore, you're going to get asked about specific industry verticals, because if you are an MSP that mainly handles healthcare, for example, they're going to want to know how many healthcare organizations you're already dealing with or potentially. And if you've seen anything specific to their industry, because if another MSP comes along and starts talking about specific attacks and compromises and information around healthcare, they're more likely to go with them. That would be it in a nutshell, right? That's like quick and dirty answers to your question there. Sorry.
How about you? So, right, we're talking software vendors. Doesn't even have to be security, right? Think of like the stack and MSP runs.
Right, exactly. I think one good question is the oddest thing is we don't get even asked this stuff much. So we know the vendors or our customers or MSPs are not asking vendors anything. I rarely get asked anything or it ever comes up. On those things. But things I should be asking is like, I think it's good to be like, well, what kind of attacks do you guys experience, if any, and what you guys do about the last one? I think that'll kind of open your eyes to like, where hackers are trying to get into this company. And then you got to think about, okay, where is my customer's data at in this thing? And if they're trying to attack that certain part of it where maybe the critical data is held, then that could be a risk, especially when we're talking about cloud stuff. Because like you said, when it goes bad, it goes really bad because you can't monitor their systems. I can't monitor our VoIP systems, that we use here for attacks. So, really, you just kind of got to put things into context with that. And also, if the implementation feels weird, like I've used some vendors, I'm just like, why are they doing this way? You guys are MSPs out there. You guys know how networks run. You know how ministry, there's some sloppy stuff that could happen. And if you're seeing some weird type of implementations of like, cloud services, but then they just give you like RDP access into it. It's like, was that really a cloud? Is that really a cloud service? It can get some weird. If it feels weird, just don't go.
Or their endpoint agent accomplishes everything with like PowerShell scripts and passes clear text passwords. So I know we've seen that a lot in this space.
I mean, you guys are
Matt, I know
smarter than the average consumer out there.
You have a hard stop. Why don't you wrap this up for us?
No, this is actually great.
Questions would you want people to ask Pax8, for example? Right? I know you guys are pretty on top of things. So
we're starting to see it, right? Yeah, I think the challenge you have, and this is an hour conversation anyway, so I'll do the 2-minute version of an hour conversation.
Part 2 then.
we might. So you have this challenge. I'll start it with this. We have had this luxury of, right, my box theory that most products never get very far above or far below the maturity of the consuming entity, right? So the humans, the companies, the different MSPs that are consuming that product. You're starting to see this rapid maturation, though, where the maturation is exceeding what's been built. And what I mean by that is you have tons of tech debt. You guys see it every day, right? I imagine which vendors have Chrome 57 binaries still running in their product, right? You see it. And so the challenge is we've been swallowing shit, straight up crap of a product from the vendors that exist in our world. And I love them to death. It's your ConnectWises and your Dattos and your Kaseyas, and it's all of them. But it's not their fault. I don't mean this to be accusatory. I mean this to say that the product is shit. Their security is shit. The way they've done things in the past, the way they've built code has not been secure. But that's not just with those tools. It's every product, it seems, across the board has been through this maturity cycle, and the SaaS products and the on-prem products all have their own problems and own challenges. So what I'm leaning towards at Pax8 for us and our vendors and conversations is trying to find standards that allow me to be less subjective, that allow me to, or objective, that allow me to be more subjective to try to suss out their tech debt affinity and their growth through these security posture things. In the past, you'd get into this world where I'd like to see your SOC 2. It's a question I'm actually getting. But I bought a company and they had a SOC 2 and it was useless. I had my heart broken because they had scoped it only to their PSA. They didn't have any of the other stuff they did included in that. So just this understanding that whole system's broken. My question is just the short TLDR would be, I would ask them at least about their ASVS and whether they can meet ASVS level 1. ASVS is a project by Jim Manico and a couple of others.
Jim knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
out of OWASP top 10, but it's their ASVS, and it talks about things like how are your secrets handled, where do you store stuff, do you have ephemeral workloads, so you can start to suss out in this monolithic app that has never been touched, or are they actually starting to recode and go through some of that tech that I can't see behind the curtains on. So that'd be the first piece, and then all the stuff that David actually started mentioning in the beginning would be the things I'd ask a vendor. Do you have an IR? Do you have a WISP? Are you planning on these things? Do you find, and your question earlier, David, of have you had any detections? Probably the best in the world, because you'll see, do they have an arrogance or transparency and humility?
Yeah.
The arrogance would say, no, not a single one. We're gold. Yeah, the humility would say, yes, 73,000 a day. Which one you want to talk about?
Yeah,
right?
That's killer. Great answer, Matt. My last one, we'll wrap this, is the one question I would ask. Do you have a regular application penetration testing program on your product? Because I think of everything, that's where the rubber really meets the road. And because you got to align your defenses with the most likely course of action. The most likely course of action, some security researcher finds an issue and
either reports or sells it, right?
Bad guys. Either reports or sells it. You never know, where they're from in this part of the world. And or both. And that can be the difference, especially in a cloud product. That you can go from 0 to 0 in like 0.2 seconds. So,
and your answer is Kismet, because ASVS is testable by penetration testing to level 1.
Awesome.
So it can be done with the application pen test. It can be all automated.
Matt, it was a joy. We'd love to have you on again. Can't wait to see you in person. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time.
You guys are my heroes. Keep it up.
See you, gents.
See ya.
Thanks a lot.